right? So we can create from FastAPI, we import the FastAPI class, then we create an object app. We use the decorator app, and then this get means that this is an HTTP GET request that we're going to use. Then we have the path that will take this request. And then we create just a normal function, and we can just return a dictionary here. This will be automatically converted to a JSON payload. And here's another, let's say another endpoint, but this is a combination of a path and an HTTP method. So this is another GET request, and we will send stuff to /items/. Now we have this item ID that goes in curly braces. These curly braces, this is the same syntax as the new F strings, which is the standard Python format for templating strings. We don't have the F here because this item ID is not a variable yet, but the syntax is the same, so this should be pretty familiar. Then we create a function below this decorator, and we declare the same item ID that we declare in the path here. And we say that this item ID is of type int. So this int, see that this is not an equal sign, this is a colon symbol. This is the standard way in Python to say that this is of type integer. And then we can use this item ID here inside. This is the URL, how it will look like. So /items/, then the item ID is this 5 here. So /items/, and then this will be the item ID. That has to be an integer. If it's not an integer, we will get a nice error, and it will just work by default. Then we also declare this Q, which is of type string and has a default of none. And then FastAPI is going to take this as a query parameter, and it's going to validate and take care of everything here. And then we can use it internally. Because this has a default none, then this will be an optional query parameter. So this is actually not a required query parameter. And this is how the API documentation that is automatically generated for you at /docs will look like. You don't have to do anything for this to work by default. So we get the /items, item ID, and here we can see that we have this item ID, which is a path parameter, and it has to be an integer, and it's required because this is part of the path. And then we have the Q query string parameter. This is a string, goes in the query. So this will go like after the question mark. And this one is not required. So we get this for free. So you write some basic code, and then FastAPI makes a docs user interface for you by default. You don't have to do anything for that to work. Now let's say that we want to declare an app with a body. We want to have a request that receives a body. So we're going to receive a JSON body. To do that, we use Pydantic. FastAPI is deeply integrated with Pydantic. So here, what we do is we create a class, food, and this class will have this data shape. We're going to have a name that should be a string, and then we have an ingredients that should be a list of string. This list comes here, comes from typings. Typings is part of the standard Python library. So this is the standard way that you use to declare the type of something that should be a list of strings. And then we declare what is the default value is just an empty string. And then we can use, then we can use this class as a type annotation here in the function. Now we do, this is a post request. This is not a get, this is a post request. It goes to food, and we're going to receive a JSON body that will be of type food. So this should be a JSON that has a name and ingredients and all this stuff. Then we declare this food as being of type food, like an object, an instance of this class food. And that is what we will receive inside of the code. This is not going to be a dictionary that we have to get its keys or something. We get an actual object that has this name that we declared here. So this is what we are going to receive. Because we declared using standard Python type hints, we get completion and stuff, but then FastAPI will use this to auto-document our API. So when we go to the automatic docs user interface, we are going to see an example that shows us the same thing that we declared. We have a name that should be a string. This is just like the example thing automatically generated. And we have ingredients is a list, or like a JSON array will be the term in JSON, that should contain strings internally, and this is all done automatically. Now let's say that we actually want to try that. So if I go back to the previous view, if I click this button to try it out, then I can actually send a request from this user interface that I'm seeing in the web UI. So I'm going to request for, this is one food that I'm going to ask. The name is going to be pizza pie. The ingredients are going to be pepperoni and green peppers, mushroom, olive chives. And then this is going to be sent. If I click execute, this is going to be sent to the API. And then I'm going to receive this message, preparing pizza pie. And this message that I see here is the actual response from the API. So I can interact with the API live. This message, if we go back to the code, this message comes from this message preparing, and then we see that we're preparing the food name thing that we receive, and this is the name that we are sending. So we can interact live with our API from the user interface, the web user interface. If any of you get this joke, let me know. Now let's say that we want to declare a body with a query parameter. We can declare like all this stuff in the same function, in the same path operation of the same endpoint. We just do the same. We declare a food. This is of type food, but now we add another parameter to this function. This is going to be delivery, which is of type Boolean, and by default it's false because it has a default in the function. Then it's not required, and then we can just like use it internally. But then FastAPI will recognize that this delivery is not path of the is not part of the path, is not a path parameter, and this is not a complex type like this food thing here. So it's going to recognize that it can extract it from the query parameter. So then we have a body and a query parameter. And if we see that in the docs, then we're going to see that we can send the body here with the data shape that we declared. And when we can also send a delivery query parameter, here's how this query parameter will look like. It will be after the question mark, and there will be delivery equals true or equals false. Because we declare it as being Boolean, then the documentation and like the OpenAPI, JSON schema, all this stuff is going to be automatically declared as a Boolean, and then the user interface will show us the only options available, which are just true or false, because this is a Boolean value. So you don't have to put everything in the body. You can put stuff in query parameters, and the same way you can do, there are some tools to do the same for cookies, headers, and more stuff. Now, let's say that your body that you want to receive is not just like this simple shape of a JSON dictionary or like a JSON object in JSON terms that has some list internally. Now we're going to receive a list of these things. We can declare that again using standard type annotation. So this is just standard Python. You don't have to use a strange type or class or anything. This list comes from typing, which is part of standard Python. That's how you declare it. Then we get these orders is going to be actually be a list of food items. Then we can iterate. This is just like some sample code. We're going to collect all the ingredients from all the food things that we received. So for each food item in the orders that we received, we are iterating for in all the orders that we received here. And then we are iterating in for each one of the ingredients in this specific food item. And then we are just adding that ingredient in lowercase to all the ingredients we have in this list here. And then we just like return that. The thing is that we can declare very deeply nested data structures like this. This is a list that contains like it will be the JSON object, the equivalent of a dictionary in the request that we send. And that will have these values that one of them is going to be a list of strings. So we can declare all these deeply nested data structures, and they will all be automatically documented in our API. So we can see that this has the square brackets. So this is a JSON array or the equivalent of a list. And it will have to have this dictionary or like this JSON object values inside. It has the name that should be a string and ingredients that should be a list of strings. So this is all automatically documented. If you want to have JSON objects in your JSON objects, you can put JSON objects in your JSON objects, so you can do like the API, API or whatever. Cool. So now what happens if we send invalid data? We declare it and it's documented and everything, but what if we send invalid data? So we declare that Ingredients should be a list of strings, but it's by default is an empty list, so it's not required. So we can skip it. Name is required, and we are saying that the first item is going to be a pizza that doesn't have like any ingredients because by default is just this empty list. Then the next one is going to be a stroopwafel. And the ingredients are going to be flour, sugar, and some magic unicorn dust to make this thing taste delicious. You can see that these are all valid data. This is our strings that are inside of these ingredients. That should be a list of strings, and we have a name. So this is perfect. Now we have another object that is this name, Trojan food. Up to now, fine. But then in the ingredients, we have one string, and then the next one is this weird thing that is an object, a JSON object, or like a dictionary that has a name, a sneaky object. So this is actually not a string. That is what we are requiring when we declared our API. And then we have this other one that says food name bread. But we declared that we need a name thing, not a food name. So when we hit execute, FastAPI is going to validate the data and send an error right away to the client with like the specifics of where is the error. So it's in the body that should have some orders. And then in the index 2, if we go back, this is index 0, index 1, and index 2. So inside of the index 2, inside of the attribute ingredients, in the index 1, so inside of the attribute ingredients, index 0, index 1. So this thing has a validation error. The validation error is that there's a string type expected. So we get a very clear validation error generated automatically for us. We don't have to do anything for this to happen. Your code won't even be executed before you get valid data. So there's a lot of glue code that you are saving inside of your application because all the data is already validated when you receive it. Now we have this other one in the index 3. The name is a field required. This is because we send this food name, but we didn't send the name thing. So this is also invalid. So we get validation automatically by declaring our data with these tools, documentation and validation, even for deeply nested data structures. We don't have to take care of sending nice errors. Like by default, it will send like this very precise validation error that is specific for the data that we send to the server. So without valid data, the request won't pass and your code won't even be executed. So you can feel safe that your code will execute only after data is valid. So you don't have to take care of checking if the data is valid or not. Now, FastAPI is all based around auto-completion. And because you are using standard Python type annotations, like this one and like this one, you will get completion everywhere, even for deeply nested data structures. So here we are saying that this orders thing should be a list that should contain, this will be JSON objects or JSON dictionaries that will have a name. And inside of them, there should be as ingredients that should be a list of strings. So this is a very deeply nested data structure. Then we are iterating for each food in this thing, and then for each ingredient in this food.ingredients. And we get auto-completion for ingredient because the editor will know that this ingredient is actually a string, even after a very deep for thingy. So we get auto-completion for all these deeply nested data structure. This is not easy to achieve in many frameworks, but because here you are using just a standard Python type hints, you get it for free by default. And you also get type checks. So again, this ingredient that is very deeply nested in the data that we are receiving, the editor is going to know that this ingredient is a string. So if you try to sum it with an integer, it won't work because a string and an integer cannot be used with this operator. We will have to convert this 5,000 to a string before being able to do this. So you get like these checks and you avoid all these errors even before trying to run your application because you just can see the error right while you're writing your own code. And this is all based on standard Python type hints. So you just use standard Python type hints, you just write normal Python code, and then you get data validation, data documentation, based on standards, and auto-completion and type checks and everything, just for standard Python type hits. Now, let's say that we want to add some extra metadata. Let's say that we want to have this query parameter delivery that is a Boolean. We want to have some information about it. We want to say that it's the delivery thing will mean that we should pack this food for delivery. So then we can, from FastAPI, import this query thing here. And then instead of saying that the default value is going to be false, we say now that is this query that we are calling. And then we can pass extra information like the description here, pack for delivery. Now, because we are not using this space over here to declare what is the default value of this delivery query parameter, now the first parameter that we can pass to this query thing is going to be what is that default value false. And because we declare it as being bool, inside of our code, our editor will know that it's actually a Boolean because we declare it as a Boolean. So the fact that we are using this in the equals won't affect the editor knowing what's the actual type of this query parameter. And then we add this description, pack for delivery, and then in our user interface web documentation for the API, we can get the pack for delivery here. So you can write your API, you can document your API right in the code. You don't have to have some wiki or some external documentation on some Google Docs shared with your coworkers that gets always out of sync, and that then like you just have like the thing live for your coworkers, for your clients, for your users, for whoever has to use your API, because it's right there in your code. Now let's say that we want to add a required query parameter, because not necessarily all query parameters are optional. So we can just omit this equals false or equals true or equals anything. And because this quantity thing is not in the path parameter and is not like one of these complex data shapes, then FastAPI by default is going to extract it from the query parameter. We could actually force these to come from some other place, like a header, a cookie, or a body, using a similar tool like this query. But for now, it's okay, like the default of it being a query parameter, because it doesn't have any default value here. It just has the type annotation that is an integer. Then FastAPI will know that this is a required query parameter. And we're going to see it like that. This is required. The documentation will show that delivery is optional, but quantity is required. If I try to click execute here, sending this food, which is an arepa made of corn flour and Colombianness, then the user interface is going to complain and show me that, hey, you declared this thing as required and you're not passing the required query parameter. If we use another tool like a client, command line application or something to actually try to send the quantity, we will still get a validation error, so it will still work. But we declare something as required, and like we will have to pass the required thing. You cannot skip data that you declared as required in your own API. Now, if we send valid data, so this quantity is a query parameter, so it will go here after the question mark, quantity equals, and then this has to be an integer. If we pass a valid data here, then we're going to receive the actual response, referring to arepas. Delivery was by default false, so this is just false. This is what we were returning in our code. Have in mind that you should not just make all query parameters required. This is not common in APIs. This is not like a common practice. But if you need to, then you can. You can make query parameters required if you need to do that. Now, some extra validation. Now we're going to say that this quantity we are not okay with it just being an integer, because we don't want someone to send a -5 to our query, to our API. We want the quantity has to be something between 0 and 10. So this has to be greater than 0. So this has to be at least 1. And this has to be less than or equal to 10. So then we just pass this to the same query thing that we were using here below. So here we use the query to add metadata, just this description. Now we are also using it to add extra validation. But because we are using this space, this slot that was for the default value that here before was false, but for quantity, we didn't have a default value. Then now it has a default value in the function. The way we tell FastAPI that this is a required query parameter is by passing these 3 dots. These 3 dots is valid Python syntax. This is called an ellipsis, and this is a Python symbol internally that is not used that much. We use it here to declare that this is something that the user or the client should provide. This is a required parameter. Instead of having like delivery is going to be by default false, quantity is going to be by default still required. And then if we see that in the docs, if we try to send the invalid data, for example, -5, while the API requires us to send 0 or 1 or more, then we're going to receive again a very nice validation error saying that the query quantity parameter ensure this value is greater than 0. So this is all done automatically for you. You don't have to write any code for this to work by default. So if you send the invalid data, FastAPI will complain, but if you send valid data, then your code will work and run happily. Now some extra data about FastAPI. It's in the top rank of performance for Python frameworks. So here we are seeing blue are Python frameworks, green are Go frameworks. So this is actually not a fair comparison because Go is a compiled language and Python is not. But still, because it uses this all these new tools for asynchronous applications, then FastAPI can actually be even faster than some of the Go frameworks. It's in the ballpark of the fastest Python frameworks. It's not that much important which specific slot here, because FastAPI is actually based on Starlet. So FastAPI is basically Starlet on steroids, but then Starlet is based on or run by Ubicorn. So these Ubicorns should actually be even faster than all these guys. But yeah, like this has some random error. But the thing is that FastAPI is in the ballpark of the fastest you can get for Python. Also, it depends on your specific needs. Maybe you need something that another framework is very optimized to do, but in general, you will get like quite a decent performance. For example, here below, there's Tornado, then the Flask is over here, and Django is somewhere below. Now, other features of FastAPI. We have seen like the basic stuff. There's more stuff. You have a dependency injection system. This is just a fancy term to say that you can create a function that then FastAPI will take care of running for you. You can use the dependency injection system to do authentication or authorization, or even database session management. So there's a lot of stuff that you can do with the dependency injection system that in many frameworks will end up having to be done with plugins, but FastAPI doesn't really require many plugins because you can do most of the things just with the standard dependency injection system. So you can just like run your a simple function with 2 lines and use your favorite packages to do whatever you have to do. You don't have to create like a special plugin or something like that. There are several tools for doing security with OAuth 2, including like integration with scopes, which is kind of when you authorize a third-party application to access your data, for example, on Facebook, then you can authorize different things, for example, to read your data or to post in your name or to do stuff like that. All that is handled with OAuth 2 and with scopes. FastAPI has integration with all that by default. You can just use that. There are tools for that. Because it's based on async.io and like these new async tools, then you can use, you can do web sockets, which is not easy with many other frameworks or tools. You can do files, upload files. There are integrated background tasks. There's this integration with GraphQL and like templates, files, like everything that you will expect from a framework, but it's not tightly coupled with anything like with an ORM or with a database. You can just plug whatever you want directly. Now, when not to use FastAPI? Let's say that you have your very stable Django application that doesn't need any new features, that is working pretty well, that doesn't need more performance, more concurrency, then there's actually not much of a need to refactor that just to FastAPI, just because. Or if you are building something that is not an API, but it's just like a standard backend based with templates tool, you can actually do that with Fast API, and it will be probably very similar to Flask or something like that. Maybe you will get a bit of extra performance, but you won't see like a lot of the benefits with something that is not really an API. So yeah, that's probably a case where you wouldn't want to do that. But for example, if you have a stable Django application, but you need to add extra features that are like in the shape of an API, or you need to have like extra performance, then you could add a layer of Fast API on top of that, and even integrate with the same database, with the same tools. If you have, maybe it's not Django, maybe it's some other tool, and it's connected with a MongoDB database or a Postgres or, I don't know, Cassandra, whatever you use. Fast API is not tightly coupled to anything, but can be integrated with anything very easily because like it's designed to be that way. Then you can like add, and this is something that many people do, add just some extra features on top with Fast API. And well, actually there's quite a bunch of people just migrating the entire application to Fast API because it might end up being easier, but it's not necessarily the best idea to do it if your tool is already working pretty well. Now, other tools that you might like. So if you like the way this Fast API thing works and the way it uses type annotations, standard type annotations, then you might want to check Typer, which is for building command line applications. So the things that you run in your terminal, and to get auto-completion in your code and auto-completion in your terminal for the application that you write, like by default, automatically. This is like Fast API little sibling. And if you're doing deep learning, you might want to check Think, which is based also like deeply integrated with these type annotations, standard type annotations. So that's a very fun tool to use if you're doing deep learning. That's what I have for you. I don't know if we have time for questions, so maybe you can continue. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed it.
Perfect, thank you. So I'm going to put some applauses.
Thank you, thank you.
So you feel the warmth of everyone here. There is 12 questions. I don't know if you do you have the link for Q&A?
Let me see, Q&A, do I see it? I see the questions. I see like the question and answer thing, but I don't see open or answer.
Okay, so
like I have 0.
Okay, so I can read the questions. So it's going to be a challenge because there is a lot. So I will pick someone. So
also,
can we use?
Yeah, go ahead.
So one question is if you can we use MVC pattern with Fast API.
MVC model view controller. So yeah. This MVC model view controller thing is like a very abstract idea that depends on the context and on the people that is talking about it. But yeah, like if by MVC you refer to building like your endpoints and then having some backend generated templates that generate HTML, for example, yeah, you can do just like Jinja too. You can integrate, like there are tools to integrate it already there in place. It's just that modern applications tend not to generate HTML in the backend that much. Normally you use a front-end framework like React or Vue.js or Angular to communicate with your API. But yeah, you can also do the whole thing in Fast API.
Cool. So someone is asking if you can upload files, but you already say that yes, you can.
Yep.
Santiago is asking, how do you write custom validators, like the length of an ingredient should be less than 10?
So you can actually, Fast API is deeply integrated with Pydantic, and Pydantic has like a lot of features and a lot of different ways, even like very complex ways to do custom validation for your data. So it's everything done through Pydantic. But I just showed you like a very small sample of what you can do. You can do like also regex, the length of the string that you're going to use, like custom functions that you add, like, yeah, you can add a lot of different things to that.
Cool. So I think I'm going to pick one more because there's too many questions. Maybe there is your Twitter there, so people can.
There's also the Gitter chat. There's like 700 something people there. If you have more questions and you're playing with it, there's always people there helping.
The last one is Pydantic has not well serialization capabilities. It can't serialize set or frozen set of objects because it makes a tick before. And the question is how could you solve it? I think, yeah.
How could you solve serializing a frozen set?
I think that's the question, yeah.
So the thing is, I guess the first question will be, how would you send that in JSON? In JSON, it will be just a list. Like in JSON, you don't have another option than a list or a dictionary. Then you can declare that the data that you receive should be a set, and then Pydantic will take care of converting the list to a set and giving you the data so that you have like unique items and you have like an actual set object in your code. But there's no way for like, I mean, it's not a limitation of Pydantic, it's a limitation of the web. JSON doesn't have set types.
Okay, cool. So yeah, so I'm going the rest of the questions. Sorry, there is still like 8, but let's continue that on Twitter. So awesome. Thank you very much. That was awesome. Sorry for the noise and the spammers. So, but you were really
yeah, it's fine. Yeah. But, I guess there are more of us that were trying to share and learn.
Yeah,
the ones
for sure.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Cool.
All right.
So before continuing, we have a link for lightning talks. So a lightning talk is you can speak 5 minutes about wherever you want to. This is the link. So if you have something to share, you have 5 minutes. Just put the name of the talk and your name there. And after the next talk, we will do that. Sam, you want to introduce the next one?
Sure, of course. It's time for our second talk of the evening, and it's David is gonna present it to us. I understand it's a bit in the same ballpark, and it should be an interesting one. So curious to hear about it.
Okay, thank you. Welcome everybody. So yes, let me share the screen. This. Okay, can you all see it?
Yes, that works. Perfect.
Okay, cool. So yeah, hello again. My name is Dawid Ziłkowski. I'm working for Container Solutions. And today I'm gonna talk about something crazy like building APIs in 1 minute. But before I do, I hope everybody understands or is aware that, of course, it's not. It doesn't matter how fast we can build; it more matters how good it is, right? So that's not a competition. Although definitely Sebastian won on the slides because I have only these two, and that's because I'm gonna show you stuff today. So that's it for my presentation, and let's go for coding. Yep. Okay, so I will show you that bloody method of building API in 1 minute. In 1 minute, actually, but before that, I'll challenge myself and I will try to do the same myself, or let's say manually. So let me start the timer. It will start beeping when it's finished. I'm pretty sure I will fail, but that's fine because then I'll show you how to do it, properly, let's say, with using ifgene. So 3, 2, 1, let's go. Or no, wait, I'll just connect my keyboard. Yeah. Okay, let's see.
We need some clock noise now. Tick tock, tick tock, tick tock.
Or some action music.
Yeah, yeah, that will be better. So for me, is when someone is watching me, I also have typos. Every time someone is in my back, I'm having typos. So I think that makes this challenge harder.
Yes. Okay, I'm done. 3 seconds left. I wasn't bad. Okay, let's see. Yes, I know. Thank you. So let's see. Okay, in theory it works. So of course I will explain in a second what I have done, what I wrote out there. But let me just clarify it works. So, okay, API is working. I created people endpoint. So let's see that. Yeah, okay. And if I want to send some data, I got status okay. All right, so it works. And yes, so let's now discuss what I have done. So I'm going to talk about ifgene. ifgene is the project I am maintaining. I didn't use ifgene yet. I used pure Python if. And I did that because ifgene is the module which you're supposed to, or is a tool basically which you're supposed to use with Python if. So it's going to work only with Python if. So what's Python if? Python if is a framework for building APIs, basically. Main page. Yes, so Python if has basically, yeah, it's a framework. It's built on Flask, and it's a framework for building REST APIs. And the point of Python if is that simple and quick, as you could see. It took me 1 minute to code it, and I did it in 2 files, while you could build a whole API with just this 1, 2, 3, 4 lines of code. Although it wouldn't do much because it would be just get endpoints. So I did it in 2 files because I could also specify a post and what kind of data I want to send. But overall, yeah, if a simple way to build a API kind of using Flask, because yeah, it's built on Flasks. So how if works is that you need 2 files. One is definition of the if itself. So it's basically importing if, creating if object and running. And then second file, which is settings.py. Let me make that bigger maybe. In this file, that's what I actually like myself about if, that you can very easily define what you need to do in the API. So I'm just defining what kind of methods I want to have, and I define it for resources. You can also do items methods, so it's going to be the same. So we, for example, want to have, of course, get and post for resource, but get and put for items and maybe delete for items, right? So we can specify simply like this, what kind of methods we want to have where. And then just by creating a simple variable in Python, you define the whole schema. And the whole schema is basically, you're specifying the name of the key, the type of the key, and that's the simplest way. I'm gonna come back to this in a second. But then if you define like what your API is supposed to do, like what kind of data it's supposed to keep, then at the end you just define the endpoint. So in the domain variable, you just specify the name of the endpoint you want to have. So in my case, it's people. If I would change that to, I don't know, employees, then of course my API would be under yeah, URL port / employees instead of people. So it's just the name of the endpoint, right? And then you just define in which variable there is a schema. So now that looks pretty simple, right? You might be thinking, you can't, it's nice, but you can't use it for anything serious, right? Well, you can, because first of all, as I said, it's built on Flask. So whatever fancy API you can build with Flask, you can build with Eve. And this is, of course, very simple example just to show you how it works. But if you go to, for example, Eve examples, then you can see that you can not only define what kind of data you want to have, what's the type of data. You can also specify a lot of things like minimum maximum length for the strings. If the key is required, if it has to be unique, if it's a list, then what are allowed values for that list. So yes, you can build normal, not API. It's not API for kids, let's say. You can build fully production grade APIs. So I need to tell you about Eve-Gene. So I'm not gonna explain you too much about Eve itself, but yeah, you just need to trust me that Eve has a lot of features. So if we go quickly, to features, then it does have most of the stuff I would say that you would expect from normal production grade API. So it does, you can do customizable resources endpoints, filtering, sorting, pagination. There was also rate limiting because I was using a very easy course support because we just need to add one line. Authentication, of course. Yeah, a lot of stuff. So if you want to know about Eve itself, then go ahead to the Eve website and check it out. But let's now talk about Eve-Gene. So why did it take me only 1 minute to build that? Well, because yeah. Okay, I hate that. Well, because my API doesn't do much. So it only takes name and age parameters, keys in the API, and that's it. So, of course, in real world scenarios, in a company, like you would have a lot of these endpoints, right? You would have a lot of data inside. So if I would have to create, I don't know, 20 of keys with different types, some of them being dictionaries, some of them being lists, then of course it would take me much longer to do that. And that's what Eve-Gene tries to solve, let's say. So what you can do with Eve-Gene, oh yeah, I'll just show you basically. Where's my terminal? Oh, okay, this here. Okay, so as I mentioned, to build an API with Python Eve, you need two files. App, yeah, it's usually called app.py and settings.py. Settings.py is the file which by default Python Eve will look for. So that's basically what Python Eve is looking for. That's why it's called settings.py. Of course, you can specify this, you can put your own name, but by default, it looks for settings.py file. So what Eve-Gene does for you is it takes JSON file with normal JSON file, which you would expect to get from that API, and generates that settings.py file for you automatically. So you don't need to write any of that because all of that is being generated from the JSON file, with data. So if we look at the sample, sample file which is in the repository, that's a bit more realistic scenario, right? So we have two endpoints here and some different types of data inside. It doesn't matter if that file has 1,000 lines or what's that, maybe 20 lines, because the process is the same, right? So what you do is if you have Python if installed, and if you download ifgene cloned ifgene repository, then what you do is you execute genif.py.file, which is ifgene, specify what's your JSON with your data, and you are done. And now the API is created automatically for you. So what I did before that writing these two files, now it's done for you. The only thing you need to actually do is to change the name of the file, because it generates basically based on the name of the file. But since Python 8 is looking for settings.py, then you just change the name to settings.py. I'll just make sure that my other API is still working, so I'll just kill it. And we just run it, and that's it. So what happened now is I executed ifgene. ifgene took that test JSON file, which I showed you before, and it generated that settings.file for us. So this whole schema generation is done for you. And as you can see, it even took some of the data validation into account based on the file. Now, that's something I need to explain. So there are two ways that you could use this. First of all, is if you really need just to quickly spin up API for tests, or I don't know, if there is some new team building new UI and they sending you JSON, hey, we need API which works like this, like this, like this. So you could just take this JSON, just generate and speed up API in seconds. But the second option is that you can actually take that JSON, which in real case scenario would be something like, let's say, name, age, address, and here would be the values, right? So I'll say David, 29 years old, and here my address. And you can change the values to something like that. If you do something like this, then ifgene and Python if will understand that this has to be integer with the range from this to this. If something like this, it understands that this has to be float from range this to this. If you do something like this, then it will understand that it has to be a list with values one of these, and so on and so on. So you can either just build that API in 1 second, just execute that one command, or you can spend a few more minutes and specify the accepted, let's say, values for particular keys, and then you have API with data validation. Now, so that's the only command you need to execute to have that API running, and that's what I meant when I said build an API in 1 minute. As you can see, in reality, it takes a few seconds, but anyway, that's not the point. And now we have that covered. So let's talk about how good that API is actually. So as I mentioned at the beginning, it's not as simple as it looks like. The API itself, I mean, because there are tons of features with Python if gives you, and with the example I showed you before, so I only specified 2 lines of code, of course, and if I spin that API again, I spin up API again, and I try to send some data which is wrong, then I'll get the error messages which actually tells you what's wrong. So yeah, of course it tells you that this has to be string and not integer, and so on and so on. So that's pretty much it. So we have 2 components here. Python if, as I said, it's a REST API built by Nicola, I forgot his name, built by Nicola Jarocci. Yes, so that's the Python if is a framework built by Nicola Jarocci, and ifgene is the project I am maintaining. I didn't develop it. It was originally developed by user Drut on GitHub. And the reason for which I reactivated this is because I was put to a project when the client wanted to make his API production grade, and they had already POC running with Python if. So I didn't have any prior experience with Python if, so I had to, of course, learn myself what it is, how it works, and so on, so on. And while I was doing that, I was bombarded with requests like this, because the project basically, that API was like a center component of a lot of teams. So all these teams wanted me to change stuff on this API on a daily basis, because the project was on early stage. So most of the time I was spending just changing string to type integer, or allowed values, and so on, so on. So of course it's not super effective. And while looking for some automation, for some solution, I found ifgene, but it was deprecated for already a couple of years, and it didn't work with latest versions of if. Also, if at some point moved to Python 3, and ifgene was written in Python 2, so they also weren't compatible. So basically I took it and I rewrote it to make it work with Python 3 and with latest version of if. And that solved huge problem I had with these schema changes on a daily basis, and actually hourly basis. So then, instead of, because you also need to understand that the files I was getting, they were like 100 lines of code, right? It was like proper API with a lot of keys. So instead of spending really like hours sometimes changing everything, making sure that this thing aligned, making sure that this is correct, that changed to simply executing that one command. And yes, that's pretty much it. There is not much more to say. There's a lot of say about Python if, of course, because as you can see, ifgene is just small tool which generates the schema for you for Python if. But all the features you would like to have from the API, you have to do it on the if side. So the point of ifgene, again. Yes, the point of ifgene is generate this schema, but everything like authentication, authorization, like rate limitings, everything. You need to either add to here somewhere to the file, or somewhere earlier to the settings. And one thing I mentioned, let's say limitations. So of course it's nice to build an API in a few minutes or a few seconds, but you need to understand that, of course, this is also not a solution for everybody, because first of all, the point of if is to generate the data. I'm sorry, I just need to reconnect my charger. Okay. So point of if is to make the API, which simply works by taking the data, sending, requesting, getting the data, and writing the data. You can, but you can't easily, and it's not the point of if, write some functions. So if you get some data, then based on data you want to do some action. That's not what if. Well, if can do that, but that's not what it was built for. So it's not that straightforward. That's the first, let's say, limitation. Second limitation is that it was built also to be used with MongoDB. So I actually didn't show you that part, but in order to make that work, I have a simple MongoDB container, which I just run by executing docker run MongoDB, and that's it. I don't have to specify anything, because if by default, of course, by default, it will look for localhost Mongo database, and it will generate the database for you. Yeah, so by default it runs. Okay, sorry, there's something wrong with my charger and I have 9% battery left.
Yeah, I was saying the number going down.
Bloody Zoom. Okay, let me try this. Okay, that's better. Yeah. Okay, sorry. So yeah, as I was saying, Python is designed to work with MongoDB. It works by default with MongoDB. There is option to run it with something else, but to be honest, I don't remember what was that database. But it's not like you can easily run it with MySQL on Postgres. So so yeah, that's the other, let's say, limitation. But overall, yeah, for use cases like that, if you just need to spin up the API quickly, or yeah, if you don't want to bother writing the API, you just need to generate because someone needs this and this specification, then I think it's pretty useful. So yeah, that's it. Any questions?
Cool, thank you. So I'm going to play the public for you.
Well done, well done.
Thank you. Woo! There is one question. Yeah, go for it.
All right, indeed, there is one question from Santiago who asks, David, how do you deal with migrations?
Yeah, depends what kind of migrations. You mean from other databases, other APIs, or what?
Santiago could maybe specify his question.
Can
No, I think that's it. And actually, maybe he's not online anymore.
Yeah, I was checking that. I'm not seeing him. Yeah. I think he was referring to data migration, like Django migration, maybe. I don't know, something similar.
Yeah, basically, if you want to migrate, yeah, from some other API, let's say from some other system you have, then yeah, you can just generate the JSON file with all the data you have. Or of course, you can be split either by endpoints or everything in one, and then just send it to this API. And then if you're running currently, let's say on MySQL or on Postgres, so we have relation database, then yeah, then it's not straightforward. You can't easily do it. You will have to anyway redesign your application to run NoMySQL for the purpose. But also, yeah, something I didn't mention, you can still specify data relation with if. So we can say that this object is parent, is child of that object. So still data relation is possible. Of course, not as rich as in MySQL, but still also possible.
Okay, thank you. More questions?
That's pretty much the only one we had, I think, for this one, unless someone has another question. No, I think we are done.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. It was really very impressive, especially in the beginning. But yeah, maybe with a bit of action music would have would have made it like.
Yeah.
I'm sure that something will go wrong. But
Cool. So we can take 2 or 3 minutes for so everyone can go for some water, etc. And then we have the learning talks. There's still time if anyone wants to sign. So far we have 2. Yeah, one of them is me, so I'm kind of cheating. Well, I was waiting for a day to show some project I work in. So the other person is Abdur. So I'm going to promote you to panelist. Can you please click the raise hand feature on the raise hand? Yeah, perfect. So promote to panelist. So it will take a second. He will be joining as a panelist. Yes. Hello. Can Abdul please check if your audio is working?
Okay.
Yeah, perfect.
Good.
Good. So I think that's all. We don't have more landing talks, so you can start if you want. Please remember, I'm going to take your time with a timer, so you have 5 minutes. You can start. You can share your screen first if you want.
Okay, let me share my screen. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, perfectly.
So I have
Okay.
I have my timer here with 5 minutes. So
Okay. So
go for it.
that's my slides. Greetings, everybody. Okay, that's basically my slide for the day. It's a small library called Faker. I don't know if you heard it before, but it allows you to generate like everything placeholders. For example, name here. You also have the address if you want, and basically you also have a profile which gives you a nice summary. For example, you have job, you have many things, even blood group if you need it. And well, that's a bit of an introduction to Faker. And I can say that if you are going for the documentations, well, the documentations for the US, for English, for the United States, is the most complete. For the, it supports many languages, many different. I don't know if kinds of English, for example, Great Britain, etc. But they are not as complete as the US one. So if you're looking for a nice something nice, so go for the US one. So basically, if you want to navigate, the documentation, so here on the left you have a nice overview. Maybe one thing which is nice, it also has a color, whatever color you want. For example, if you want random color, but in the red region, so you use hue is equal to red. You even have, for example, company, you have credit card, internet, basically even user agent. You can fake your user agent that's maybe useful when using requests to to pretend you're someone else for an API when querying an API or a site or something like that. It might be useful, but really it's an amazing library. It even has like you see fake MD5 hashes, and it even has fake files which you will need to write to binary. And for example here, fake URL. Well, basically maybe email, that could be a problem if someone has its name, it generates a completely different email. If someone it is called AB, so the email will be completely different, not related to the name. So that may be something to to see, and it also has username, basically many things. So practically I use it, for example, here is a website, is a web page, so I don't need to develop all my complete database section to see what my site will look like. So I just use Faker, for example, for the name and for maybe some text. So that's one practical use of Faker. Another practical use of Faker is for database, to populate databases. You get everything you need, even passwords, etc. So it's a great library to have at hand. So that's basically it.
Cool, perfect.
Okay.
Just in time. So 50 seconds.
So I'm
Thank you.
coming. Okay, I'm coming back to Zoom. So I'm not seeing the control or. Well, okay, stop sharing. Okay, that's fine.
Let me see.
Thank you.
Yeah, cool, perfect. Thank you. So you now I need someone to take the time because it's I'm going to present. So usually if we are when you're in real life, there is 5 minutes. And after 5 minutes, people start clapping or doing some noise, so it's not possible for you to continue. So I will share my screen here. Share. Yeah. So can you see my screen now?
Yeah, perfectly.
Okay, perfect. Okay. So I'm going to talk about fades. Fades is a library that I started like a few years ago with Facundo Batista. That is a friend from the Python Argentina community. So virtual EMs are the big deal. They are really good. So we use them for every day. Usually it's really weird to be installing libraries in your system. So we are always using virtual EM. But there is a problem. You need to manage. So you need to create a virtual EM. You need to remember the name. You need to upgrade. You need to have like a folder with them. They are not always in your repo. So it's not really easy. So how we can improve it's a library that you can indicate the dependencies. Then you indicate your dependencies are going to show how. You execute the script, and then that's all. You just use your script with your virtual env. How it works? So you can execute your script using fades. So fades space my script, just replacing Python. You can put fades as a shebang in your script, in the top of your script. Or you can use fades as a Python module. So Python-m fades and your script. And the other part that you need to know how it works is how to indicate the dependencies. So I want to execute my script with request, and fades is going to create a virtual env with request and execute your script inside that virtual env. It will first check if there is a virtual env available with request. If there is one, it will use it. So in some way, fades is like a cache for virtual env. And it will open a Python interpreter with requests available. So it will execute that interpreter inside the virtual env. Or if you want to use IPython, you can say fades request -- IPython, and then it will execute IPython with requests available to use. If you are using legacy Python, you can say, okay, I want to use Python equal to Python 2, and it will create a Python 2 legacy virtual env with requests available, and it will open an interpreter there. Of course, you can indicate more than one dependency, so request and mutation here. You can tell fades to use a particular version of a dependency, same that you use for requirements text files. You can use your requirements text file for sure. So fades -r the requirement in your script. One level up. This is an example of a script. It has a fades in the shebang, and then there's a comment. So import request, and then with a comment, fades if you execute this script, Face is going to create a virtual M or reuse a virtual M, and request is going to be available for your script. That's all. That's all you need to know. I want Django 1.8. You can see these slides are quite old. And then -X, so that means execute, and you can execute the Django admin and start a project. That's I think useful when you are creating a new Django project. And there is more, like you can pass options to pip. You can say, okay, pip, I want to use this particular repo for my pip packages. That Faith is supporting that because it is just using pip under the hood. And yeah, that's all. So if you want to know more, you can go to GitHub or you can search for us in Freenode, etc. Thank you.
Thank you.
And
Got a couple comments in chat, but no proper questions.
okay, cool. Yeah, no, it's learning talk, so it's no questions.
All right, cool.
Oh, one question. Is it your library?
I'm one of the maintainers, yes.
Oh, cool.
Okay, I think we are done. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Sam. I will give you some time now to finish. Thank you, Jan, Sebastian, and David. So, I rename it. It's not Sebastian, it's Esteban, I think. So it was a really nice meetup. Please remember, go to Py.Amsterdam to propose your talks. And next week, same day, same time, we are going to be hosting a meetup online also. Okay, Sebastian, sorry. it was right the first time. Okay, so that's all.
Yeah, thank you everyone. Thank you very much for joining. It was really interesting. Thank you to both speakers, Sebastian and David. It was quite nice. We can tell the audience was quite interested by all this. So thank you again. Same thing, yes. A big shout out to PyAmsterdam for doing a lot of that work. And yeah, Software Circus always ready to have speakers come take a tour on our meetup page. And all that good stuff, and wishing everybody an excellent evening.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.